Hello and welcome to the PocketGamer.biz podcast week in mobile games, where we discuss the week's news and provide some insights. I'm Craig Chapple, head of content at PocketGamer.biz, and we have a special guest this week. Fundamentally Games CEO Oscar Clark is back. Welcome back. How you doing?
I'm all right. I have a Pocket Gamer title too. Contributing editor. Would you believe? I mean, obviously, it's a very fast score because I don't contribute much apart from turn up at conferences and occasional podcasts and say hello and shout opinions. But that's basically what I do generally anyway.
You always have loads of valuable insights, and then at the shows you run like the track rooms and.
Yeah.
Loads of stuff for us.
What you're basically saying is I'm old and I always have an opinion. So,
so what are you up to at the moment? You're in Poznan.
I'm literally in Poznan. So in Poznan here in Poland, they have a event called GIC, major event, and it's a consumer and trade show. It's been running for many years. Before COVID, they were having up to like 70,000 people attending. So we're talking about a conference that's maybe kind of getting close to the sort of Gamescom kind of scale in terms of audience. Not necessarily as well known as many of them, but an incredible space, and they make a really amazing effort to make sure that you get incredible speakers. I was just a few minutes ago, I was sat in a round table talking about how to remove uncertainty in game design, which made me very happy. I love chatting about that, and obviously trying to throw in my own frameworks and concepts into that as well, which is always fun.
That sounds awesome. I've been there years before. I think I said that. I can't remember when it was though. I want to say about 2018.
Yeah,
I went to Poznan.
What I find really interesting about Poland in general, and we'll probably get to this later. I mean, there are certain communities where there's standout qualities. And when I first came to Poland, and it's probably 2014, maybe 2013, something like that, when the game Super Hot first came out. It was like the very earliest time they were showing it off. I mean, the actual date would be whatever the year it was that they first started showing the game off. But it was just one of about half a dozen games where the developers had managed to not just do the kind of usual thing of making the game that they used to play and try to make that for themselves. It wasn't like that, which you see usually when you go to a place that hasn't got necessarily the deep heritage of development. Instead, they were doing these clever things. So each game had some little clever twist to deal with a constraint. And it always makes me smile when I see somebody who's going not just to make the same games, but to actually try to think about how to bring something new to it. Mm-hmm. And I've always found Polish developers being really good at that.
Yeah, I remember seeing a lot of that. At the time, there was the one game, 10 seconds or two.
60 seconds to Armageddon or something.
That's it. That was it. It was quite stressful.
Yeah,
in a really good way.
Is that you in that particular game? If you're someone I'm thinking of, you're going to rush around the house to pick up the things that you're going to need in order to survive, and to make sure you get all of the people into the survival shelter, and then you see how long you survive based on the 60 seconds you had to collect things.
The first run through of that I did, I was just sort of thrown into it, and then I got the stuff, went into the shelter, I realised I didn't take any of the family. So my character just instantly went mad.
Yeah. But this is what I think, this is exactly the same, this is the same kind of period, not quite the same, but pretty much the same sort of period. Again, this is an example of where someone is not just trying to recreate a story or a platform or a Mario game or whatever. They've tried to bring something creatively to the piece. Now, is that going to become the next billion-dollar game? Probably not. But will it inspire developers who are making some part of the next billion-dollar game to do something a little bit more interesting, a little bit more intriguing, that captures the imagination of a player? And that's kind of where I kind of feel happiest in my design ahead, which is I don't necessarily expect everyone to come up with avant-garde ideas, but I think when we can look at these avant-garde ideas and think how we can make them more accessible by understanding why they work, then we make better games.
Yeah, for sure. So before we jump into the week's news, just the usual few shout-outs. So we've got, don't forget, we released the top 50 mobile game makers. Check out the link in the description. We've got Pocket Gamer Connects Jordan coming up on November 9th and 10th. And we've got Pocket Gamer Connects London returning, our biggest show of the year, on January 20th to 21st. Right, so we're going to run through the news. So first up, going to talk about Netflix.
Yes.
Again, I think we talk about them quite a lot on the show. I'll run through the story quick. So Netflix's internal studio Team Blue has been closed down 2 years after forming. That was according to a report from GameFile. It's a California studio established in October 2022 with Overwatch executive producer Chaco Sonny at the helm. Later brought in the likes of Halo creative lead Joseph Staten and God of War art director Raphael Grassetti to create games for their subscription service. It was believed to form part of a plan to take its game ambitions beyond mobile, and it was kind of referred to as a brand new AAA multi-platform game and original IP. I think I read that, so console game, and that it was going to be a shooter, which makes sense, I guess, with the people that they brought in, Overwatch and Halo. A Netflix spokesperson confirmed it, that the studio now closed, and those 3 key hires, they've actually all left. It's not clear how many staff are impacted by the decision to shut the team, but GameFile did note a report from Business Insider that their new president, Elaine Tascan, recently recruited another Epic Games VP, this time of game development, Jeet Shroff, as Netflix's VP of game technology and portfolio development. Netflix reportedly recently cut 35 staff of its team, including from Team Blue. So GameFile said that number was likely lower, which I don't know if I just misunderstood, because I would have thought it would actually be quite a big team. So maybe I'm slightly misunderstanding. I thought it would be quite a big team working on a console AAA shooter. Maybe it's early development, but interesting. Anyway, interesting. I guess what that means for Netflix going forward. I guess it means that the new president is actually enacting some changes. You assume that those are his decisions, not from the co-CEOs. And maybe now they'll focus on, which I think sounded like their plan, largely to focus on like the mass IPs that they already own. And we interviewed Leanne Loom earlier this year, and she, one of the things that she was saying is that it kind of, the interesting thing I thought from that discussion was how things work both ways. So they obviously do Netflix stories as one example, working with IPs, and one, it engages kind of the fans of those TV shows further into a game, but then also she was saying that actually they can get new users that maybe just want to play, I guess, an interactive fiction game, whatever genre, and then they might then go and watch the TV show or movie.
That logic makes sense, but I think that and again, so we pitched Netflix a game a while back, and the impression I got was that there's so much. I mean, again, I might be wrong, but my impression was that there's so many barriers that get in the way of that logical juxtaposition. So, you've got the contractual issue, you've got the cost of the IP issue, you've got the complexity of making a game. The complexity of aligning the audience expectation in play with the audience expectation of watching an experience like that. So what I'm trying to say is that I'm a massive believer in driving IP using multiple media elements. I think, there's some amazing opportunity there. But every time I kind of like come even close to getting involved in that, and none of them have worked out. Every time I got close to involved in that, it's always been the lead media has to be dominant. It has to be dominant. Now, so that means when you've got a TV show or a film, you cannot effectively create rules, mechanics, narrative, arcs, etc., that can impinge on that original media. You have to be very, very careful of it. So that creates some massive constraints. But also, who owns that IP? And there's a lot of ambiguity in IP ownership. I mean, one of my heartbreaks in this world is that one of my favourite kind of like 1970s, 80s fantasy films, Hawk the Slayer, which is owned by the Kingsleys, can't be made because some of the IP isn't owned by them. And this is my understanding. I don't quote me. Apologies, Jason, Chris. If I made a mistake on that, but that's my understanding. But what an amazing IP, and surely that needs to be imagined with the type technology we have and all the potential it has. But that's just an example, and even again, let's take Rebellion as an example. There is a team that produced one of the best science fiction films in 3D that we've ever had. Dread, amazing film. It didn't do well in the box office. I don't understand why, because it was actually genuinely fantastic, and I genuinely think it was one of my favorite films. There's spectacularly done and works really well with the comic and potentially with games. You can see that working. That is where the team owned the IP entirely. So if you're a Netflix, and I imagine most of the Netflix deals, there's distance between the kind of like clarity of who owns which bits and how much can be done with which bits, then you've got a massive amount of commercial complexity. That infringes on design integrity. And then trying to make a commercial game off the back of that, you're now not only dealing with the death by 1,000 cuts of the creativity, you've got the death by 1,000 cuts of the revenue shares, and you're now trying to get an audience for that, and that's not straightforward. So I have a lot of sympathy with what Netflix are trying to do. I think that we don't give them enough credit for the effort they're taking, but also I think we also give too much expectation that it will necessarily win, if that makes sense.
That was really interesting. My general take with like game subscription services at large is I kind of struggle to see the long-term business model working. To be honest.
And you're hiding the lead because you know my opinion on this, and I've said it many a time very publicly. I have a basic language for this, which is subscription without upsell is death. And it's a bit extreme. But so why is the live ops advocate like me saying subscription is death? The reason is that subscription is like gym membership. So I don't have to earn your subscription. You're by default paying it automatically. I have to cost myself in putting you through so much pain that you cancel the subscription. So I've got to make you act to cancel it, if you get my drift. Now, what that means then is it's very easy to get stuck in routines. It's very easy to not think that you have to earn the player's watch time. And you do. I mean, regardless of the method, and by the way, I love subscriptions in terms of the revenue stream, but if I can't delight and excite you, I cannot make a commercial justification internally in my organization to invest in doing better. Because the revenue is committed on what we've already delivered. They've committed to it. But actually, why I like games as a service as opposed to subscription services, even if you use the same pricing models, is that I've got to come up with player utility consistently and predictably. And I can continue to provide things that you want more of. And if I can create a fan ecosystem where people who can play and engage with, whether it's free or not, or free or paid, it matters because of scale, but it doesn't necessarily matter in terms of the implementation. But if I can create that desire to play and I can build play and engagement, well, that generates revenue. And so for me, the subscription model makes sense when you're dealing with a movie offering or a music offering, provided it isn't divided by, you've got to have all the content to make that subscription work. All being probably a bit too strong. But what's going on at the moment is how many different subscriptions you've got to have to get all of the different experiences. You've got Paramount, you've got, Apple, you've got, Netflix, you've got Prime. There are dozens of others, depending what kind of content you want. And every time I want to go and get the thing I want, my choice of content isn't necessarily matched with the available content. I still have my Netflix, but there's a whole bunch of content out there I just don't get to see. So again, this is what I'm saying. Subscriptions is non-trivial. Upsell is what makes that work, and it only happens when we're actually thinking about player value.
Yeah, I always just slightly a tangent from me because it's not really Netflix, but like because I know they're trying to create certain types of experiences, but you can't really create like a a game that someone's going to play like forever, as it were. Not that all games have to do that.
RuneScape? Have you not met World of Warcraft? Have you not met Candy Crush? Have you not met Angry Birds even?
And then they don't. You can't put
Polytopia.
them on a subscription service.
Well,
because what's the point? Because then it's one of those things where that would work for the platform holder. In this case, like a Netflix
but subscription
or
services, that's exactly
it wouldn't work for the publisher.
But it's exactly where the MMOs came from.
Yeah, right. No, so but there's a subscription for but then in that case, it's a subscription for that specific game. Right?
It is, but
right, I'm talking about a subscription catalog.
Yeah, but a subscription catalog, the fact that somebody chooses to spend most of their time playing. Well, let's take the one that is kind of in some way dominant in console space, the Game Pass, right? So Game Pass, I would never have played Fallout 76 if it wasn't in Game Pass. I'm so glad I did. It became one of my favorite games. I did not want to pay up front for it. I became, able to use it and play it because of that. I also carried on playing Starfield and various other games because I have that Xbox Game Pass. As a consumer, Xbox Game Pass is fantastic. But do I spend any money on the store? No, I don't. Why? Because they stopped taking games out of Game Pass over time. What was really effective about it back in the day, always love it when a cat turns up. What I loved about it as a strategist is over every month, new games would arrive, old games would go. So it was managing the tyranny of too much choice. Yeah, there's a tyranny. There's a problem if there's too many things to choose from. Now, if you know a game is coming in and you get to play it for a period of time and you know it's going to leave at some point, the leaving creates a sense of FOMO, fear of missing out. Therefore, you can either complete it in the time period available, therefore you get on with it, or you leave it and you miss it and you can choose to buy it. Maybe you get offered a discount on the thing as it's about to exit. Now, if that's done well, the result is that everyone knows it's coming, it's going to be leaving on this date. You know from the date it arrives that it's going to go. As long as it's consistently delivered, ongoing, we know what we've got to expect. But because they lost that consistency, maybe it wasn't really there, but it was in my head, you've lost that expectation. Therefore, nothing is really seen to leave. And therefore, this tyranny of choice racks up. The proportion of people are getting a percentage of that revenue goes, so the incentive for the developer is gone, and the excitement of the new is diminished. Because I can still go back and play Slay the Spire, because I can still go back and play Fallout, and that because they're always there. Therefore, there's no excitement anymore. The only plus side to that is that there is upsell. So I can buy extra stuff, and I spent more money on updates to Fallout 76 than I ever would have spent than the price of the original package game.
Yeah. I'm always curious about that model. For anyone that is watching, there's my cat, by the way. He's come up to see me. For audio listeners, I have a cat called Gizmo. He's ginger. He's 18 years old, so he's doing well. And but he just wants a bit of a fuss. He's been asleep all day, and naturally, as soon as I go on the podcast, he wakes. Of
course.
But he's lovely. Hopefully, he doesn't scratch me during the show. I'll edit that out. He does. Right. So thanks for all those great insights, Netflix. I hope you're listening.
I'm 10%.
The next story. So. There's a new studio that's been formed. They're called Antihero Studios, founded by ex-Supercell and King developers. That includes Bryce DeVille St. Martin, is the CEO. He formerly worked as marketing, creative direction, and operations at Supercell. The founding team also includes Brawl Stars senior game designer Frank Yan, who joined, I think, 2.5 years ago and really kind of helped power that game's revival. I guess there's a really great GDC talk, a lot of experimentation, and then finally they kind of hit the jackpot, I guess, late last year with some of the changes. And then it's also got ex-Bandai Namco mobile software engineer and King senior technical director Andre Parodi. So they want to create games worth sharing. Their mantra is create games worth sharing. They're focused on socially engaging multiplayer games. So this is going to be a perfect topic for you, Oscar, as the person who wrote the book on games as a service.
Yeah. Go on, plug it away. That's it. Vocal press.
yeah, I'll add a link.
All good bookshops.
In the description.
It's only 10 years old. Actually, I'm just amazed it still works. Sorry, keep going.
And then, so we actually we interviewed Bryce, and he had kind of a lot to say about what they're doing, why I guess they're forming a new studio, and how they think they're going to do things differently. But the really interesting quote that stood out for me was, and I'll just read the whole quote. So I believe IDFA. So IDFA changes is a positive turn for the industry as a whole because it forces game developers to refocus on creating games that are worth people's time and attention. Game developers are tired of making games constrained by what works as an ad. They want to focus on making great games worth playing. Marketers are tired of creating questionable creative ads. They want to focus on producing great marketing worth remembering. Players do not want to engage with games that are not worth playing or remembering. A couple more quick notes. So he later said that there is so much more marketing innovation going on in other industries than in gaming, which I thought was quite interesting. But he highlighted specifically companies brands like Liquid Death, Nude Project, and Gentle Monster, which break the rules of their respective industry to stand out, he said. They are the brands that matter, the brands that are part of culture, and that are ultimately remembered by consumers. Yes, basically, they want to create social experiences spread by word of mouth and memorable brands. Lastly, he did say nothing against performance marketing, but he said, but what they're against is over relying on it and not realizing that if you want to drive business metrics, brand matters. Performance advertising only becomes more efficient the higher your brand awareness. More awareness equals higher conversion rate, he said. So my last point...
I've only been saying this for 10 years.
I just found it interesting because really, it's just interesting to hear someone say IDFA changes are a good thing when it has caused obviously major challenges for the industry.
But put it this way, right? So the issue with IDFA isn't that we don't want privacy. Privacy is something we should be doing. The issue with the IDFA, in my opinion, is the way that it was implemented by Apple. And, this is my opinion again, methodology that they used in the notifications when it was an internal Apple product versus it being an external Apple product, to me did not seem like an equitable way to do it. It did not seem like a consumer-friendly way of doing it, or one which would support an ecosystem of app developers, in my opinion. The result of it is that we ended up with a massive hole of Apple users, which obviously is a significant proportion of not just players but also spenders in apps in general, and that disproportionately affected the other third parties like the Googles and the Facebooks that we have often relied on in terms of identifying and targeting players. Absolutely true. Now, similar problem is obviously, we haven't seen an effective Apple solution that allows us to do the kind of targeting we would want arise from that, in my opinion, again. But again, that doesn't take away what they're saying. The bottom line is that we've always, like I say, I've been saying this for 10 years, we dismiss the value of brand building at our peril. We have been overly relying on performance marketing. And don't get me wrong, as a former evangelist of the very use of performance marketing through rewarded ads. I'm not trying to dismiss performance marketing at all. It's a miracle of data. It's a fantastic thing. The fact that, whether we're dealing with, attributing an individual or a cohort of individuals through interests, I don't think is as important as the fact that we're doing intelligent, data-driven exercises. So IDFA has removed the individual targeting elements or a proportion of those, and made us rightly focus on interest and concept and therefore creative. And that is a good thing. And I wholeheartedly agree with these guys that is a good thing. It doesn't mean we aren't going to suffer if you're a smaller developer and you don't have big budgets, because the cost of identifying and targeting the very people you want is more expensive as a direct result. It just is. That's it. The irony is, at the same time, so again, I'm going to get all sorts of things if I'm not careful, because you could add in COVID and that hid the impact, and now post-COVID, we no longer are hidden from the impact, and we've had the reduction in people's ability and willing to spend because of the economic impacts of various, wars and combats and shenanigans. Whether Mr. Trump returns to power is not going to be important in this concept as well, in my opinion. But anyway, all that aside, what are these guys saying? For me, games that are worth sharing is absolutely what we should always be doing. Have the incentives been disproportionately on keeping people on a page to watch more ads? Yes, that's what hyper casual did. That doesn't mean that hyper casual didn't bring something interesting too. Hyper casual taught us the importance of rapidity, so doing things really fast, iterating fast, and I mean incredibly fast, in hours, not days, not weeks, not months. Using data as an absolute, and focusing like a laser on single playable mechanisms. And I think if we can bring that hypothesis-led, evidence-based mindset that hyper-casual did with this more creative, conceptual, narrative, engaging, emotional-driven design, that's when we're going to get the best experiences. Because at the end of the day, what really matters is, are we satisfying player experiences? That's it. Everything else is BS. The bottom line is, unless we are identifying and satisfying real player experiences, we're not getting there. How we monetize that is a question of how we, think is the most appropriate mechanism that feels the most naturally resonant with the player. And I always feel like something ongoing is generally best if you have a game which playing is generally ongoing. So that's why I'm a free-to-play guy most of the time, because I think that if I've got a game experience that you want to keep playing and I can keep it interesting, I'm going to find a mechanism where I bring value to you that makes sense with the way you play the game. And that to me is what all this is about. I mean, there's some great language in there. Yes, I'm glad someone's saying that it's not all bad. The IDFA has happened. But I think the way it was done was particularly not great for the industry.
Yeah.
But the idea that we have to be more creative, and actually with all of these things, even the whole downturn, we're now starting to see the sort of seeds, the green shoots starting. At the same time, we're still seeing things dying off. We're in a messy period right now. The positive that will come out of that, in my opinion, is the way that we find stronger teams, more creative teams that maybe got cast out because of reorganization with these fully merged, maybe you could argue, teams that had existed, them streamlining, the people who leave having a bit of hopefully some of them having a bit of cash out after that process. Not all of them will, and there's a lot of tragedies in this process, a lot of tragedies we don't hear about. We've had to, pull our belts as well, so we totally understand it was some of our team, feel very sad for. But the bottom line is there is a lot of opportunity that comes out of this. And I've seen cycles like this before, probably not quite as deep, but every single time we see new things, new interesting things. And one of those periods we saw Supercell come out. One of those periods we saw, other teams of equal scale. We see these emergent, industry challenging teams, either directly or indirectly, timed with some of these disturbances in the model.
Yeah, I think there was you make a good point. I remember at Think Gaming Istanbul, so the Extractor of Fun event, Eric Kress was on stage, and not to play down at all, like this kind of the state of the games industry, but he made an interesting point that it was like it's probably the first crash, not crash, sorry, don't use that word. It's the first like downturn, I guess, of like the mobile games market. So there have been them at large for the games industry previously, but mobile hadn't actually been through that. So it might actually seem the whole situation, and then it kind of seems a bit worse. Than actually, it's kind of actually. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but these things do happen, and then you do come out eventually on the other side. Things are a bit different.
Yeah, and I think one of the points here as well is a lot of people talk about mobile being the thing that changed things. I'm not convinced that's quite true. I mean, it's not wrong, but I think it's coincidence that it was mobile to a certain extent. I think it was a new space, device-wise, that would allow data-driven techniques to operate, including ads, where the audience were not going to reject that new approach. We haven't seen that happen in console. We haven't seen that happen in PC, because the audience is more mature and established and have different expectations, so they're not going to be as happy to see ads in the experience. Mm-hmm. I don't think that will never happen. I just think it's unlikely to happen without some really radical rethinking about what ads look like. And, at the end of the day, there was a moment in the early days of rewarded ads when we had consumers off the street in panels in game industry sessions, and they said, they asked these genuine consumers, should they get rid of rewarded ads? Would they pay to get rid of rewarded ads? And they said no. They wanted the rewarded ads. Now things have changed. We've got these stupid mechanics that ad companies, in my opinion, have wrongly added. So extending the duration of the ad, making it hard to find how to close the ad, forcing you to play a playable after watching the ad. All of these nonsense things that make it a worse experience has changed people's opinions, and it made people a lot more cynical. But at the time, think about the idea that I'm doing a run, I screw up right near the end. All I have to do is watch an ad to get another chance to continue. But I only get one chance of that. It's not like it's a get out of jail free forever card. Get one go. That means that I've effectively got a power up that I don't have to pay for. I can just watch the ad and feel like I get to save the day. And all I do is spend 30 seconds watching an ad. Now, that's a different way of thinking. And unfortunately, we're not in that space because of all the extra garbage that's been added on to the process.
Yeah. It randomly reminds me, I think I know the company, but I can't quite remember, so I won't call them out specifically because it might be wrong. But they released this big report, and a lot of it was about ads. And one of them, I swear, they were basically just saying, like, more ads is better, basically. And they were given some ridiculous data about it. And I'm just looking at it like, I mean, of course you'd say that. You want more ads in games because that's how you make your money. I was like, is this even true? I don't know.
Oh, I know. I mean, I've seen some ridiculous ones. Some chucked in with blockchain and various other things as well.
Yeah.
And I'm not 100% against blockchain. It just, just when you smell a Ponzi scheme, you can smell a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
But again, not saying every blockchain is that. But I think the sort of issues I've had. So, for example, we had some games back in the early days of testing this stuff, where we would have 30 ad views a day on average. Think about that, 30 ad views. That's insane. But it was the way people were playing those games at that time. And it was fairly fresh and early in the era of that stuff. But again, when you put it into context, we were talking about 4 or 5 sessions a day, maybe even 5 or 6 sessions a day. So that number of ads split by that number of sessions, it stops being quite so ridiculous. Mm-hmm. When you think of it like, I'm going to get this ad gives me a double reward for I don't want my rewards this time. This ad lets me restart a screwed up play. This ad lets me open a reward crate early. Again, the difficulty, and by the way, I'm not recommending people do this at all. Do not do this. I'm just saying this is some examples of in the early days, we saw it wasn't a question of the number of ads, it was a question of the value it gave you. And so if the players feel that stuff is worth it, that's okay, but it's got to be worth it. If it's not worth it, don't do it. Yeah, and I'm in the middle of writing a book on the subject, which is why I'm pontificating about this stuff, because I'm letting it go through my mind how I'm going to write it up.
So we just got like the perfect stories for you today, Oscar.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's like last time you had me on, you had Unity removing the
during the podcast.
during the session. Hilarious. By the way, just to shout out the number of Unity folks who were really nice to me after my article and been since this announcement. I have to sort of give them kudos.
Yeah, definitely on the big charm offensive at the moment as well. Unity. But that's another topic for another time. So we spent quite a bit of time on those couple of stories. I'm going to quickly run through a couple, and then we'll jump onto the weekend views.
Derail you.
No. And then, so Supercell is hiring for a small cross-functional team based in London to support development on Squad Busters. So a couple of roles that they had going at least earlier this week, or they might have added more. Senior game programmer, senior game artist, senior game data analyst. So now they're just basically getting a small office to get them all together. They already sort of majority owned space at Trailmix in the city, but now they've got another office space. But yeah, not a full-fledged studio.
People though. I think that's interesting.
So I reached out to them and they said it said that basically they actually already employ quite a few people in and around the London area. So they decided that it makes sense they could have an office that people could go to. And some of those will be helping with Squad Busters.
Makes sense.
But yeah, I think it was just a space where they can kind of get together.
Well, it's a epitome of the example of we can remote work anywhere, and I honestly believe remote working is so powerful. I'm still frustrated the teams that have gone back because I think it impinges. I mean, the amount of wasted hours traveling to an office for me just seems insane. But equally, at the end of the day, I think it shows that whilst they have an amazing environment in Helsinki and it's a great place to go, it is still difficult to recruit locally.
Yeah, I mean, they made it's about nearly 2 years ago now, in Ilka's blog post, they were talking about they were looking at remote working and potentially having some people do that. There's still a major focus, I think, on internal at Helsinki studio.
Yeah.
But yeah, now they're kind of expanding their, like you said, their talent pool, I guess.
But like you said earlier, it's like there's not all of the same systems are in place nowadays, so things will change.
A few other quick stories to go through. Games industry M&A activity hit $2.5 billion in Q3. That's the fourth consecutive quarter of growth. A lot of that powered in the last quarter by Playtiker's acquisition of Superplay for $700 million upfront, worth $1.95 billion. Technically $2 billion. I keep saying 1.95 billion, but there's an earn out of 50 million as well. So for the founders,
I think it's interesting. Particularly, I've also heard a lot of the angel investment community in the UK have started doing more as well. So I definitely see a positive shift at the moment. We aren't there yet, but in terms of we're still seeing net more negative news than we are seeing positive news, but I think we are starting to see more positive news, and it is getting there. I think before, by the time we get to 25, it'll be a little bit easier, hopefully.
We're all hoping.
Yeah.
And then this is reported by Mobile Gamer. Ubisoft cancelled Gwen's Getaway, their puzzle and decorate game. Apparently, they're just going to take the lessons from that as they move forward. I don't know what that means for their mobile strategy. They don't really much have one. They do have some talented teams like Calibri, but
I'm old enough to remember when they separated they took their mobile license of their console games back from Loft, and that was an interesting era. But that's quite a long time ago. We're talking about, honestly, I can't remember, maybe 20 years nearly. I mean, it's got to be in that order of magnitude, because that was originally the thing, is that Gameloft were the mobile, and UB were the rest of it. And there was also a separate team that Christian, who one of the other brothers ran, called AMA, that did sort of non-game app type stuff. But like I say, things have evolved a lot since.
And then lastly, Pop Reach Games has closed its Vancouver studio. I think that basically means Pop Reach no longer exists. The India studio was bought, and their catalogue was bought earlier this year by Phoenix Games Group. And I think Ionic, their owner, has basically been saying in their investor relations that they're pulling out of games, focusing elsewhere. And then lastly, some investment news. Party Icons lands $9 million in seed funding for mobile first Web3 games. And I think it was a UAE based investment firm, Redwood, acquires majority stake in Indian game streaming startup Loco for $65 million. They're going to expand globally, try and take on Twitch in areas where it's not that big, apparently. We'll see how that goes. So that is the end of the news section. We're going to jump into the week in views with like 10
the whole
minutes
time doing that. Yeah.
It's basically one long week in views.
Yeah. But it's interesting you mentioned the India investment thing, as well. We'll get.
Good segue.
Well, I mean, I might as well go into it. So, I mean, I thought it was interesting because I've definitely seemed to be getting a sense of a kind of change in sort of, well, I think it's more of a culmination. I mean, India's been involved in the games industry for a very long time. I remember India Games back in the day being one of the earliest kind of mobile teams that we worked with. And that team ended up, I always forget who they ended up as. Anyway, I can't remember exactly. It might have been Zynga, it might have been Disney. I think it was Disney. I think they were bought by originally. Anyway, but the point is that there's always been an India Games environment, but I'm definitely getting a sense of a positive kind of maturing in that space and a definite kind of increase in engagement. And there's a particular, we occasionally do things like due diligence of particular games. We're working with one team for an indie developer. I won't say the name. I don't want to kind of like cross the streams, but I was incredibly impressed. But not just by the fact they had a really efficient and good tech team, but their creative application was really good. And they were producing kind of the sort of Diner Dash style mobile games. And they had some track record, but doing for somebody else's IP. I got to see their own IP. And they had this nice little twist. It was essentially bringing a new flavor, a new kind of reason to keep playing. And it really kind of showed me that there's a maturity in design that I hadn't seen before. So I've definitely seen them, and there's a couple of other games. There's a small team that are just trying to raise funding at the moment. I'm kind of talking to. And the guy who's setting up, who's ex-VC himself, he's got a track record in making games too. He showed me his like, oh, have a look, this is just one of our ideas. And it was like, oh my God, I want this game now. And it was like, it was magical. When you rarely see it, but occasionally, you've done the big indie pitch enough times, you see a game and most of them go, yeah. And then one of them you go, oh my God.
Yeah, for sure.
And it was that moment, but it's probably the most enthusiastic I think I've ever been in someone showing me a demo game.
And you would have seen like to be clear, you'd have seen a lot. You've seen a lot.
Oh, I've seen hundreds of thousands of games. So. I can't remember how many games I've seen. It's you think about it. I've been in the industry 26, 27 years. I've done more judging probably than most people. I think the only person I can think of who's probably seen more games is Jupiter, who now runs the big indie pitch.
Yes,
because she's insane and she reviews every indie game jam game. Oh, but she's lovely, but she's insane. Love her to bits. But anyway, the point is that I'm not lacking in having seen games. This game really excited me. Really kind of made me. And this is like just the first idea they had. There's another company that I'm actually contracting with, and they're basically trying to work out what they're trying to make, and the pitch is great. I mean, they haven't got the full kind of spec yet, and I'm obviously going to be helping them with that. But I'm sat there going, but where's the creative idea? Where's the twist? Where's the unique selling point? Where's the reason for me to, as a player, to care? And I think I've definitely seen a step change in indie game development of late, and I think that it's triggered by this in this economic circumstance, with an environment which is already very tech centric, very capable technically, because of so much investment in outsourcing and development, various other things in that space. And at the same time, a gradual maturing as they've got more and more exposed to Western and Asian content. I think there's been a maturing in that industry, and I think we're just at the point where I suspect we're going to start seeing an explosion of really talented Indian game studios.
I've been to, what was it used to be called? It's now called the India Game Developer Conference. I think they're doing it like now or like next week or something.
It's something like that, yeah.
I'm not going to be there this year, but I've been to previous years, and it was just really interesting to see how they're kind of coming together, the studios, to help it grow, get it international attention, and they've been working at it for a very long time. Unity used to do, I don't know if they still do, some like shows alongside it. But anyway, so it's just been interesting to see it grow. I think so you had like games like that I guess made outside of India. PUBG and Free Fire really shown that market there is potential to make revenue there. So I think that's been a real positive for the industry, despite like the bans that they got, and then they're back, and then they're not, and then they're back. It looks like I really want to get the revenue out in front of me, but like I don't think they're really at where they want it to be, like as an industry, like as a market by revenue. Like they've always talked about the potential, and I think it's still the case where it's high, really high downloads, and not so much high revenue. Just talk about
but it's interesting the quality of the devices. So we've done a bunch of tests with the Indian market because we wanted volume to be able to test kind of like performance of the game experience. And we were quite amazed how high spec the devices were. We went in with an expectation of low quality devices, and that wasn't the case. We definitely saw a lower revenue. Very low ad revenue in terms of, because obviously specific targeting of that audience it scales, therefore it's going to be cheaper, therefore you're going to get less revenue. So I think there are some economic questions about their local market, but the dev teams I'm talking about, their focus is actually on the global market. So I think your point of there is a really impressive market there. The scale is phenomenal. There are some specific genres that are no-brainers. Basically, if you want to find the best cricket game in the world, you're going to find it in India, no question about it. There's about 30 of them at the top. Well, there's more than 30. It's hundreds of them. But there is more than that. I mean, there are teams out there doing really interesting things. And like any climate, they're going to, any market, they're going to have their specific tastes. Again, it is a complicated market because of the disparity between the high earners and the low earners. It's not quite as complicated as the African market, where there's so much is prepaid card based. I think I'm right in saying it's not quite the same in India, but I don't think I'm not as au fait as I should be on this, but I think it's the case that there's not the same connection between the handset manufacturers and the operators and the way that you buy things. So I think there's complexity there as well, which doesn't help.
A couple of other quick points I wanted to make was that I guess the two big companies, I guess, kind of emerged over the years. Nazara, I guess, has been around for a very long time, but it very notable. And at the moment, past year, they've been making a lot of acquisitions and investments. Like they bought think discussed on the podcast a couple of months ago. They bought obviously Fusebox in the UK. They had $100 million war chest. Now I think they've raised a further like $100 million. The CEO Nitish was saying, he's been running this company for a long time, and for many years they couldn't get investment, and so it kind of sounds like I think you mentioned this a minute ago. The investment landscape has changed in India specifically, and that they are able to attract like bigger investors now for their ambitions. So that's really
definitely feel like there's a step change in the investment community. Like I say, we've engaged with one of those investment teams to do some due diligence work, and it was really interesting talking to them and their expectations, which are no different from any other kind of VC in terms of scale. The only caveat that they had was wanting to deploy specifically in the local Indian market. So the fact that there is a bunch of investment community people there that feel that they can focus their attention on that market and gain developers in that market, to me just speaks volumes about the potential for that sector to grow.
And also a shout out to, I guess, Winzo Gaming. They probably the other big publisher. There's a few, like GameShin does really well out there in India. But yeah, Winzo, they've been hugely successful, but they set up the India Pavilion at various events. So they did it at GDC. I think they did it at Gamescom. Gamescom Latam at least. And they basically fund some developers to come over with them, and they show off their games on the booth once again to kind of publicize the industry and maybe attract investment partners, etc. So there's a lot going on in India. I feel like this will be forever saying for the next decade still, this is a growing market, but at least it's not going the other way.
Exactly. And like I say, I think we're generally seeing positive signs throughout. I just think that we're not quite at the end of the difficult times yet.
Yeah. So thanks for that, Oscar. I'm gonna really quickly run through just an article I wrote. I'll put the link in the description so people can see it there. I'll do the quick cliff notes. I wrote an article like I've been wanting to write this for a while, but everything is a games platform. Yes, I am riffing off of Eric Seufert's "Everything is an Ad Network," just to be clear. But it just occurred to me because like all these kind of announcements that sometimes seem ridiculous, but it's always fascinating. But now, you've had it in the past. You've had like Snap. They ended it, but they tried to do games. TikTok experimented with games. Now it's like I guess a brilliant marketing community platform, which is now their focus. But they've tried games, and then now you've got like kind of Discord. They did do their games marketplace. It failed. But now they're doing Discord activities, so actual games on the platform. LinkedIn is doing games. Telegram's doing games. And it's actually doing really well. Well, numbers-wise, it's doing really well on Telegram. And actually, maybe that's a really good platform emerging for Web3 gaming. You can play games on Zoom, or you could play games on Zoom. I don't know if that's still a thing, but basically you could just play them anywhere. New York Times, obviously they've done really well with games. I actually play a few of those a day now. They acquired Wordle. I love Connections, brilliant game. I think you've got in China, you've got WeChat mini games, which made. According to an article by Jakub Rumar, it made $2.3 billion in the first half of 2024, which is amazing. About to surpass 500 million users in China for WeChat mini games. So I guess my point basically is just everything is becoming that. I guess why? I guess it's just a way to engage. In theory, it's a way to engage users to be using your platform more so they don't go anywhere else. You've got all these users. Can you find a way to, one, engage them and also potentially monetize them if that's part of your goal? In the end, I just finished the article with saying, like, whether some of these attempts kind of Whether some of these attempts to provide new destinations for gaming prove fruitful in the long term remains to be seen. Oftentimes, I think the business case for platform holders outweighs the one for developers, and that ultimately brings about their failure. But everyone just wants in on games.
Yeah. Well, we were seeing this before as well with, I think Cal did it once. Line was doing it at one point. I think WeChat does it as well. I mean, if you've got a platform, what do we do socially as human beings? We play. It makes sense. The Moji Works folks are really interesting. If you ever get a chance for them, I did a podcast on the Game Dev London, Game Dev Local podcast. I keep saying London, it's local. Change the name. A Game Dev Local podcast. I did a chat with her. She's released a book on game design worth sharing. Basically, I may have misstated the thing, but there's a lot of if anyone's interested in these kind of like shared experience stuff, the stuff that Moji Work guys do is really interesting. So,
and Moji Works was is Matthew Wiggins, who was the ex Zynga London or Zynga UK.
Yeah, Matt's fab. That whole team's just
they've got a lot of experience there. And and the other thing I'll just touch upon is, I guess, like, because if everywhere is becoming a games platform, I think a lot of that is powered by web gaming at the moment, which has kind of made a comeback of sorts. And I remember years ago, I looked back in 2012, I wrote an article about HTML5, and then like for the next decade, you just hear like, or like HTML5 is coming, or like everyone's suddenly like, it's not really actually for gaming, it's not really a thing now. And then now it's actually kind of powering some of those experiences. So
it's amazing what you can do with HTML5 and WebGL. The issue has always been streamlining the user experience for making purchases. It's always been that, and anyone who manages to make that feel natural and easy, which should be trivial, I would have thought, given the amount of things we buy online, it should be trivial. But I don't think anyone's really nailed that experience, and particularly, how can I promote my app on your platform? I think that's the thing that they often solve the spend, but they never seem to get around to solving the promotion part.
I think one of the challenges that some of these face is, like, if you're gonna, like, Telegram gets around it, maybe LinkedIn gets around it, Discord, but like it's actually I spoke about it before, so I won't labor the point. But like when Facebook Instant Games came about. And I think it was an issue with Google. I can't remember if it was Google or Apple. I think it's Google. They basically, Facebook wanted their 30% cut, and then so did Google. And so developers made 49% share, which obviously was unacceptable. And then so...
Well, you're telling me, the guy that took 60% when I was doing Java Mobile. Well, hey, I still paid out more money than anybody else at the time. It was nothing.
But yeah, it was just like... So sometimes you are kind of at the mercy of the larger, I guess, actual platform holder, not just your app or whatever.
But then this comes to me back to the questions that I think we still haven't resolved. Are the EU going to enforce the ability, the Epic kind of like argument that you should be able to have multiple app stores? Are we going to find better ways of dealing with it? At the moment, I can't even buy a Kindle book on my phone without opening a browser separately. I mean, that's insane.
She can't do it in the app.
No, you've never been able to do it on Apple. But I can't remember how recently, but I haven't been buying Kindle books for ages, and literally tried to buy a book today on Kindle, and the Amazon app won't let you buy it anymore. And I had to go into a browser page, open up the browser page, and then buy it.
It's a crazy world that we now live in.
Yeah, absolutely insane. So, but look, again, back to the point is, where does that 30%? If you want to get into the difficulties of working out the exceptions and all that kind of stuff, we don't want to have, back to our tyranny of choice. We don't want to have to choose which of the 30 streaming platforms, which of the 30 app stores, which game is on store. It's a nightmare. I just want to go and play the thing. We just need better ways of managing that.
that's like, I guess, like slightly different. That is a slightly different topic, but I think we spoke about it on the show not that long ago, where it was just like you you don't want there to be a monopoly for a marketplace. So,
No.
Steam example on PC.
Yeah.
However, how convenient is Steam? Is fantastic. Obviously, there's massive cons and then there's pros for this, but like to your point, there's that era of every publisher was just like, well, we want our own store. So here's Origin, here's Ubisoft's thing, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
And here's something, Battle.net, here's Rockstar's club or whatever it was. And it's just like, I don't want all of these. I want it in one place because I don't want to have to load them all up. Now there's just a couple. It kind of makes more sense. So it's that weird thing.
But retail solved it. They had wholesalers and retailers. So you go to the retailer you wanted, and they would source the game from the wholesaler. So, why aren't Google being a wholesaler rather than a retailer?
Interesting question.
Because, I mean, you'd have less, shares, but what would happen is the integrated marketing effort that could be done by brands that were selling experience. Anyway, I'm available for consultancy work.
we're getting way off topic, right? Let's.
No, but the point is, we're talking about consumer experiences, and what at the moment we have is a complicated consumer experience.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, we just want to make games that people want to play.
Well said. So that brings us to the end of the PocketGamer.biz
Long-lasted end. It's only been how many hours?
Yeah, it's only been 1
only
year.
An hour and a quarter. You see, you shouldn't invite me on. I can't stop talking.
No, it's been brilliant. Fantastic, real industry insights that I think everyone will really appreciate. So thank you so much for being on the show, Oscar. Have a fantastic time. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and listening. We'll catch you again next week. See you soon. Thanks. Bye.
See you soon, folks.